work at Ericsson, and I've been involved in OpenDaylight since, well, not quite the inception, but pretty early on. And one of the things we really struggled with was how do we get involved? How do we start a project? How do we get engaged with other people's projects? What does it mean to be a committer compared to a contributor, and the general governance of it? And I wanted to come and sort of share those experiences. And so we have a few minutes now where I'll try and sort of talk through how it is to get involved in OpenDaylight, what it means, what some of the things you will hear means, what wrangling is, for instance, and a few other concepts which are quite common in open source communities, but not things we hear in large companies very often. I was a little perturbed from the last presentation. I don't know how many of you were here, but there was a good conversation on northbound interfaces, and at the end of it, the conclusions I came away with were that we're going to undefine the problem using policy. We're going to expose it through a northbound API, which is going to be an information model which redefines that undefinition of a question, and then after we've completed that, we're going to get it wrong. And if you take that definition, then I just feel like, okay, don't worry about this presentation, head home, it's all over. No, I shouldn't say that, but anyway. What it is a great challenge and a great opportunity to get involved and help answer those questions, because they are some of the fundamental questions for SDN moving forwards. So let me get started. The agenda then, I'm going to look at some of the OpenDaylight stuff. So if you are in the audience and you're thinking, we want to get involved, we want to do some project work, I'm going to sort of show you the stuff that's on the website and then translate that into things which is how I sort of recognize what it means. I'm going to talk a little bit about the community, which is extremely important when it comes to doing anything in this group, and the ecosystem. And then the OpenFlow plugin project, which is the one I was mostly associated with, what it took to get it started, aligning the scope of the activities, executing on the plans, which was also very different, and then finishing and delivering. I'm going to try and wrap up in some way. After that, we get a coffee break. So if you don't ask any questions, you get coffee quicker, but do feel free to ask questions as we go along. Okay, so if you go to opendaylight.org, this is what you learn about getting started. Developer documentation is on the wiki site. It has lists of all the current projects. It has their various states. What you'll find is that most projects are in a more advanced state than they are documented, and that pretty much remains true of the projects for their entire life cycle. Everything is done in source code, and the best way to learn what's going on is to jump on IRC or get in touch with some of the people involved. You get links to documentation, you get how to build the code, how the architecture should look, and of course the architecture should look the way it should look because people have pushed code to make it that way. If you think it should look another way, then start pushing code to make it look another way. It's very simple. Information and proposing new projects for OpenDaylight is all there. If you want to start a new project, go to the wiki, figure out how. And then of course the lists. Go to the discussion group lists. They are very busy lists. There's a lot of conversation. You'll get things from we need to redefine how we're going to do multi-instance cluster management to I got a bug when I tried to install it on the list. So there's a little bit of filtering that has to be done, and that's all manual. Cross-project discussions are very important. They're also on the mailing lists, and any announcements. The IRC channel was slow to take off. I think those who know how to use IRC used it very well. The rest of us, me included, who had no idea what IRC was when I first heard of it, it takes a little while to get going. It's basically just a text stream. You can throw stuff up there and you get responses. There are people sitting there all the time. So if you do throw a question out there, expect a comment back. And it's a great place to go for, I guess, a real-time conversation with people, not needing to use a phone. Okay, getting started with the projects. First questions, the easy ones. How much does it cost to? So when I go to various forums and things and I stand there and I'm wearing an OpenDaylight t-shirt and saying OpenDaylight is great, people come up and they say, we want to do something. How much does it cost? Well, the answer is pretty simple. It costs you nothing. Just get started. OpenDaylight is open source. It is free to use. It is founded by the Linux Foundation. There are a number of big companies like Ericsson involved in it, but we don't own it. We don't govern it. It is a community. And the community is free for everyone to be involved. And I would invite anyone who is interested just to get involved. You can do something. You can come in and you can say, I want to make a new app which does some random function on a network. And you can propose it, you can write it, you can send it up there, and it's perfectly OK. It might not be used by anyone, but you have the freedom to throw anything into the OpenDaylight community. Who is deciding who can do what? The community. We do have a technical steering committee. I sit on that board for Ericsson. The technical steering committee has the power to say no, but we rarely ever use it. We would only say no to something which is obviously not in the community's interest. In other words, you can pretty much get involved and do whatever you want to do as long as you have the community support to do so. And the community is growing, the community is healthy, and the community talks a lot. If you want to know how something that you have an idea about would fit into OpenDaylight, the best thing to do is talk to community members, talk to TSC members, and understand how that might look. But at the end of the day, it's a community-driven activity. It's not governed by a TSC. The board doesn't get involved in the software. It's very much an open source community. And who is allowed to do things? Anyone can do things. Anyone can do anything. If you want to become a committer on a project, get involved in it, contribute lots of software, and you will be made a committer by the community, because the community will decide that you should be a committer because you have provided enough value into the community. Who is allowed to add software to this project or that project? Anyone. There are no restrictions. It's perfectly open. You can jump on the wiki. Anyone can jump on the wiki and make a change to it. If you think there is something that you would like to improve there, you can do that. So the second questions I get, they're not so obvious, is how do I propose my idea? I have a really cool idea. I don't know how to get out there and get it started. I'll go through that. How and where will I implement my idea? I want to add a function in the controller to do something. How am I going to do that? Where am I going to do that? There are ways to find that out as well. And it's not possible for me to stand here and answer that question for everyone, because it really depends on the stage of the project at the time. It depends on what projects are ongoing at the time. But there is always somewhere that you'll be able to implement your idea. What do I need to provide or contribute? And that's completely up to you. You can provide or contribute whatever you want to provide or contribute. And when is a project created for an idea? And that's another important question. The TSC has a role in this. You can have ideas, we can propose ideas, they can be discussed in the community, and then a project will be created. When a project is created, there is infrastructure put in place, there is a repository placed, there is naming and all the things needed to provide the software. There is a formal decision function with the TSC to actually create a new project. But it is very easy to create new projects. No projects so far have ever been told no. Every project has been accepted. We have had a couple of projects proposed and then pulled out, but no project has been, let's say, rejected as a concept. It is possible that a project should be rolled into another project which is doing something very similar or the same, and that has happened as well. And actually, most people that walk away after these types of questions, they, well, I didn't expect it was going to be that easy, or I didn't expect that it was that open, or I didn't expect, there's been a lot of I guess, publicity or statements in the media about how this is governed and you have to be part of this ... in order to do something. There is no such thing. So, proposing an idea. I have an idea, great idea. I write it down. I stick it on a piece of paper. What do? I send it out to the community. There is a list called project proposals. You send it out there and people look at that. I look at that. Everyone on the TSC looks at that. And you put an idea out there and you'll get comments and feedback. You can post it for feedback as well. The wiki has a special area where you can go and you can put a good description, you can show architecture, you can show ideas and concepts. You can even put source code up for review in the wiki site, so the community gets a very good and clear understanding of what it is that you want to do. And then you elicit feedback and advice on how to engage. I want to add a new function in the controller that's going to change the way that routes are processed. So I want a new project. Now you might be told, don't create a new project, that's something that should be in the controller project. Instead, contribute it into that project. So there are different ways on how you should engage. So after your idea has been put out there, after some discussion, some feedback, knowledge about what it is the community would expect from your idea, your project has been sort of tuned, let's say, to be compliant with the controller project and community as a whole, you'll get a chance to realize it. During the discussions, you'll get input on how to implement your idea. No, I wouldn't implement it that way because it will be easier in the controller to integrate if you do such and such. These are the types of things you'll get back. You may find also there's an existing repository that's already doing something similar or is a great place to host your idea. So we don't have to create a new project. You can literally start to work on an existing function and extend that with what you need. You'll find collaborators. One of the key things we really want is diversity. If you have an idea, don't expect to sit in the basement and write the code and just submit it later. That is possible to do, of course. You can do it that way, and some projects have started that way. The best way to do it, though, is to really engage on the IRC channel, talk about what you're doing, try and get other people involved. What you'll find is that there are a lot of coders out there who just want to do good stuff. And if you're out there talking on IRC, you'll probably find that there'll be a lot of coders pushing software into your repository in order to make your solution better, or improve, or help you speed, or help you hit a deadline. Let's say you want to get out on a certain release. You'll find collaborators. Another thing you can do at project creation is to predefine collaborators. Talk to various people and say, do you want to help? And set your timelines according to that. And projects interested in using your idea. If you want to add a new function which calculates routes in a better way, you might find the Affinity project knocking on your door saying, hey, that's really cool. Can we describe that in a certain way in Affinity so that it will utilize those functions and therefore we'll have a better abstraction to the data center guys? There is a lot of good collaboration and discussion across projects. As we did stuff in the 1.3 OpenFlow project, other projects were talking to us about how can we use this, how can we extend our project in order to take advantage of the OpenFlow 1.3 capabilities in the network. And you will learn during these discussions what will be needed to realize our idea. At the end of the day, after you've proposed your project, there is a 2-week vetting period where you will talk with the community members. They'll ask questions. Clarity will come. Some sort of, I guess, architectural alignment with the big picture will be realized. And then you'll go and undergo a creation review. And this is the process where you present your idea to the technical steering committee. You refer to the discussions you've had. You talk about who you've been talking to and the feedback you've got. And at this point in time, you'll also know whether you need a repository. You'll have a good idea about the naming conventions you want to use. You'll know who is going to be actually committing to this. Committers are important in OpenDaylight or in any open source collaboration. Committers are the guys that are able to approve the software going in. Anyone can push software to your repository. Anyone. I can come in and write a piece of code, and you may not want it. So you need committers that can gate this and make sure that if they see a patch coming in they don't like, they can send it back to the designer and say, it's not quite right, can you just adjust it in order to use this data type or to use this type of structure? When creating a project, you need to have your committers lined up very carefully because they are your architects, your principal engineers, whatever you would like to call them. They're the guys that kind of own and live and breathe the project that you're creating. Contributors are many, committers are few, I guess is maybe the way to look at it. Everyone can contribute. And dates. You'll be told when everything will be ready. If you're pushing software that exists, let's say I've done a northbound function which is programmatic for SDN controllers, and I have that already and it exists, and I say I want to contribute this to OpenDaylight, then that's part of your contribution. There will be dates about review for that. What happens is that we have to review that to make sure that we don't break the EPL constraints or the Linux licensing constraints or Linux Foundation licensing constraints. So if you're going to push software in, it needs to be reviewed for legal reasons and so on and so forth. You'll get dates about when it will be ready, when it will be uploaded in the repository, that sort of stuff. Yeah. So that's about how to get the project, let's say, off the ground, have the repository in place, and be ready to essentially start designing. Feel free to just stick your hand up if you want to ask any questions as well. So moving on from that to the community and the ecosystem, let's say I've got a project going, then I kind of have to work with people. I have to know who these people are. And it's a very, very broad ecosystem. The ecosystem is maintained by the Linux Foundation. And when I say maintained by the Linux Foundation, they're the guys that kind of own this project. They look after the well-being of the community. They make sure that the community has support and the sustenance it needs to thrive. And it is supported by members of the community. So Ericsson is a member. We paid money to join this. We didn't expect to get anything out of it, but we paid money to join this because we believe in it. Now, by believing in it, we fund it. And what the funding does is it allows us to create repositories and all of the tools and everything that the community needs in order to build a controller. So the members of the community are very important. The sponsors of the community are very important. And the community is, let's say, the heart and soul of the activity. If you actually push some software in, we have these funny little coins, OpenDaylight Hydrogen code, it says. If you actually pushed software, you'll get this little thing here. And this is a fun little thing, but it's also a really core little thing. I have pushed a piece of software into OpenDaylight. I know that I've contributed to this. I have a little medallion which rewards me for doing so. And the number of developers that have come around and just said, this is the best thing I've got in ages is amazing. It's such a small thing, but it's really part of a very small community. It means that you are valued in the community, and the guys are literally showing them to each other and smiling. It's fantastic, just because of the community effort. We heard Neela talk this morning about the strength of the community, and guys like Ed Warnicki and Colin Dixon, I think he's run away, Madhu, all these guys have been absolutely instrumental in making this successful. Okay, so a little more about the community. It is inclusive and welcoming. Everyone this morning was also saying, someone comes with an idea, someone comes with a comment, someone comes with a thought. There are people that will just pull you in. If you go onto IRC and say, I really want to do this, I think this would be great, you'll be pulled in by people. They will come, that's fantastic. Let's set up a meeting, let's call. It doesn't matter where you are. People sit up all night long and talk. Developers in China need help with the core stuff. The guys in North America working on the core stuff will sit up from 10 o'clock until 4 o'clock in the morning working with those guys because they believe in the inclusiveness of the community and the health of the community. We are active 24 hours a day. The IRC is open 24 hours a day, and it is active 24 hours a day. We have the Americas, Asia, Europe, and South Asia all covered. There are collaborators and contributors from all across the globe. And it is. I put this at the bottom. It feels a bit weird, but it's an example of diversity driving innovation. It's really, really true. Ideas are realized here. It's not ideas are discussed here. Panels are great, but even the guys on the panels are saying, push the code. That's really what matters. Realize your ideas. Don't just talk about them. Membership. I mentioned members. Members are important and valued contributors to the supporters of the community. That's really bad English. But here are the members. I thought I would refer to them because these are the guys that put some money into making this possible. They're sponsors. They've also put people into making this possible, and they've put the right people. The people in OpenDaylight want to be in OpenDaylight. A lot of the people that I knew who started in Cisco or started in Juniper or started in wherever now work somewhere else, but they're still doing the same job. Their careers are now defined by the fact that they are active in this community, and they're wanted by other companies because they are able to commit to this community and provide in this community. It's an amazing experience to have gone through the last 9 months. Okay, so the community, it's an active community. It welcomes collaborators and it values code. It's all about the code. I have one of these because I pushed a very, very small amount of software into the repository. I'm not a valued member of the community. I'm a good spokesperson, but I have not pushed enough software really to consider myself an OpenDaylight community member to the way that a number of people are. It's all about the software. I try and help get the software in there, but it's been a long time since I actually pushed any myself. So the plugin project. How am I going for time? I don't have a clock. Plenty of time. So the OpenFlow plugin project, when we started this, we got an OpenFlow 1.0 southbound as part of the controller. And a few of us were sitting there going, well, we need 1.3.1. 1.0 isn't feasible moving forwards, and we want this to be future-proof. So we decided that yes, we want to start a project. Our friends in IBM, our friends in Cisco, Pantheon Technologies all agreed. And so we sat around the table and we said, well, let's get together and do it. So we actually started this, and we all nominated 2 committers from each company. And we said, we're going to get together. It's a big undertaking, and we're going to figure out how to make this work. And we're going to put 1.3.1. We're going to have a multi-protocol southbound for OpenFlow. It's going to be a long-term project. We're going to support it moving forwards for 1.4, 1.5. When we get 2.0 in the future, we will support that as well. This will be the open interface based on OpenFlow southbound from the controller. So we intended to evolve and improve what we had. IBM had been very active. They had grabbed the code early on, and they were very interested in making this work better. They were very interested in having 1.3.1, and they had some really good ideas on how to get the job done. Pantheon had some really good ideas on how to build a strong, forward-thinking library. And of course, we in Ericsson, we just wanted to see the whole thing work, and we wanted to make sure that the plugin southbound was going to be solid and work properly. So we all seemed to have the right interests, and we had a very collaborative view on how to get the things done. We wanted to get the best design patterns in place. We wanted to use the best libraries available, open source libraries if possible, or we'd code our own. And we wanted to use model-driven design. A lot is made of the MD-SAL. A lot of discussion around the MD-SAL. It's like the black magic inside the controller. No one really understands how to work with it or what it does. It's actually not as hard as you would think, but it does require a change in thinking. You don't just sit down and write some software. You actually have to think about what it is that you want to describe, and then you describe it in a model, and then the software is written for you. And that takes a little bit of getting used to, because you don't know what your interfaces are going to be until after you've finished building the model. And usually we do things incrementally. But that's OK. And we wanted to adopt the latest platform technologies for SDN, which really were coming out of the work that the controller project was doing. So we had a virtual team. It was formed across North America, it was formed across Europe, and it was formed all the way down to India. And we sort of wondered to ourselves, how the hell are we going to do this? We have some controller guys here, we have the tools guys here, we have a library being built here, and then we're going to do the plugin down here. Each of these have hundreds of interfaces and APIs to each other, and none of them existed. So we had a controller which didn't have interfaces towards the plugin didn't have interfaces towards the library, and we had a tool set that we had to use that didn't exist at the time. And it was a bit of a mess, actually, to try and figure out what piece of software am I going to write today. Code is king, and we really didn't know what to write. So it was very much a matter of communication and collaboration. Everyone had different thoughts. And to be honest, this is kind of what it looked like when we started. It was a mess. We had views on how the library should look. We had views on how it should interact with the plugin. The Pantheon team had different views. IBM had some experiences that they wanted to bring to the table which didn't match what we were thinking. So here's the phone. We read the manuals. We sent a lot of email. And that didn't get us very far, so we did it again, and we did it again, and we did it again. And we ended up sending a lot of emails, and we ended up on a lot of phone conversations. And we ended up referring to a lot of documentation, and still we couldn't conclude on how this would look and how we would structure things together. So we went back to our little map, and we said, how are we going to do this? Let's get together. So we were very fortunate in that we got some key contributors coming and visiting us, and we sat down, we had video conference, and we spent a couple of days really nutting out how the architecture would look. The architecture that came out really was not what I had in mind. I had a very different view of how we would build it. My team had a very different view of how we would build it. The team in IBM had a very different view on how we would build it. The Pantheon team and the Cisco teams all had different views of how we would build it. But at the end of the day, after the workshop, we came out to something of an architecture. And it looks like this, and this is the only architectural picture I'm going to show you, because the only thing I really want to identify here is that it takes time. It takes a lot of discussion, and sometimes you have to sit down in a room for a few days and nut things out to some real degree of detail before you can make a move forwards. That's not common in OpenDaylight. I think this was maybe one of the more complex projects that was undertaken, well, aside from the controller, of course, when it comes to handling multiple stakeholders and handling multiple views and trying to bring everything together. But this is how we managed to achieve it. Once we had the architecture, then it was just a matter of writing some code. Again, we still didn't have interfaces. We still just had an architecture. So the guys sat down, they started modeling. This is how my thing will look. This is how the library is going to look. And we're going to describe the models in such a way so that we can interact with it. And then they'd pass that to us, and we would check that against how we thought things would look. And so we used models a lot. Yang became our friend. And until we got those models aligned and matched up to something that we could execute on, that took a little bit longer. But it gave us a starting point. Then we could write some code. And then we wrote some code, and a couple of months later, we were able to actually plug things together. And of course, we interpreted the models slightly different than everyone else did, but that's OK. The intersections between the projects, they really do create communication needs, and they add dependencies. And these are key things. These cause time delays. I think that's the biggest thing. It's not that things are insurmountable, but when you have a 24-hour-a-day active community, it can take a day before you get a response. And they introduce uncertainty. One of the things that at least I loved as a coder was when I knew exactly what I had to do. If I was a little bit unsure, I would type slower. That was just me. I don't know if it's everyone. But if you have uncertainty when you're trying to execute, that can be difficult to overcome. And the project intersections that we had in this project, I think, caused us some delays. We know that the hydrogen release was due to be delivered late last year. We know we're delayed, and actually the OpenFlow plugin project was one of the reasons we're delayed, because we had so many interdependencies and there were so many moving parts. I mean, even in the controller, there was a full cell rewrite. We elected to go with the new cell. We didn't see any value in staying on the old cell, and we took the risk. That risk paid off well, now we're on the right cell, but it also paid off in some delays. Again, more calls, more emails, more specification reading, until we got the code done. Then the finishing and delivering, and I don't have a lot of material to show here because the finishing and delivering really for me was a bit of a maelstrom. It was complete madness. I learned a new word that I'd never used in software development before, and that was wrangling. I'd never wrangled in a project before, but this was used as a common term. Yeah, exactly, wrangling. When you have so many projects and so many repositories, so many coders and so many things happening at once, it's not like we're sitting in a company where we can sort of dictate, you should do this now because this guy's waiting for you. It's not that simple. You have to ask and you have to wrangle. And so the wrangling is really about asking and motivating people to do the right thing because we have to get things out the door. And the last, I would say, since December, it has been a process of wrangling. And it's the first wrangling we did in OpenDaylight, and it's been a real experience. And I think it's brought the community so much closer together. People start to understand what other people are doing more because people are knocking on their door constantly and harassing them on the IRC channel. I really, really need this. It's, well, why? Then you get an explanation why, and then you start to understand. And now the community has a much better view, I think, overall of how the project is structured, how we interact with each other, and how we need to move forwards when it comes to developing. What this means is that any new projects coming in have, I would say, a friendlier environment to come into. People understand what it takes for a new project. We've all been through it now. We have a release out the door. Even projects like the OpenFlow project, where none of the contributors for the OpenFlow project had ever worked in an open source project before. So we had 4 separate projects, of which none had any experience in open source. Now we all have experience in open source. We all know what you need if you start a project. And we all know the challenges that you're going to face. So the community is much stronger now that we've actually pushed this release out the door. And the release, I think this is a version 5 and there's a version 6 out now. But at the end of the day, I gave a small presentation about that tiny little box over in the corner there, the OpenFlow project. And you can see all the boxes here. Most of these have their own repository. Most of these are their own project. And most of these have required the same type of communication, collaboration, and organization that we've been through. The fact that we've managed to push this out in a project within 7 months is, in my mind, astounding. I couldn't fathom trying to do something like this in a corporation. There were so many escalations which, in a company, are handled in such a different way. The wrangling is really a value add that you get in an open source community. But just adding on a southbound now is very easy. If you want to add a protocol southbound, there are 7 projects who have done so. 7 projects that can help you get that done. If you want to add an application, there are 4 released projects and many others which are not yet released that can help you do that. If you want to add functionality to the controller, or if you want to expose new APIs northbound, there are a bunch of projects and experienced engineers who have now gone through that and done that. I think the environment for adding projects and getting started in OpenDaylight is much stronger now than it was as we tried to ramp this project up. We are going to get a very early coffee. The other thing is to stay informed. I mean, I talked a little bit about the community and the need for openness and information. OpenDaylight.org is the place to go just for the high-level stuff. The wiki is the place to go for the details. I've pushed a lot of people to look at the wiki, and they've all come back to me about 3 days later saying, I didn't get anything out of that. The wiki is complex. It's done by designers who are in the code. Trying to go to the wiki if you're not in the code can be difficult to maneuver through. Often the best thing to do is go to the wiki, find what you're interested in, and find whose name is associated with it, and look them up on the IRC channel so you can ask them a question. It's much, much easier. So join the conversation. The OpenDaylight IRC on Freenode is really the best asset. If you have a thought or an idea, or if you want to do something in OpenDaylight, that's the place to really start the discussion. You can always reach out to the community. I mean, you know who we are. We're all standing around here talking to you. You can come and see us in the breaks. You can come to any of the OpenDaylight Hackfests. The Hackfests are a great opportunity to come in and vet a project. If you want to start a project, you can say so at a Hackfest, and then a group of people will sit down at a table with you, and they'll talk you through it and talk about how it might be done, talk about the best ways to do certain things, what tools are available for you to get that done, and then they can also help point you in the right direction as far as promoting that towards the community for adoption. We haven't done a Hackfest in a while. I'm sure we'll start to do more again. The reason we haven't done one in a while is we have been wrangling for months, so we've all been a little busy. But I think that's all I have to say. Yep. About getting started in OpenDaylight. I'm not sure how many people in the audience are actually thinking about doing so, but if you are, feel free to come and talk to me or ask now. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Otherwise, it is coffee time. Very good.
So do you pretty much have to be a developer to participate in OpenDaylight, or is there opportunities to be engaged without being a developer?
Yeah, okay. So the question is, do you have to be a developer to be engaged in OpenDaylight, or are there other opportunities? You can be engaged in OpenDaylight as a voice of reason. You can be engaged in IRC or on the mailing lists. You can engage in many ways. I think to have an impact on OpenDaylight, you have to push software. You can try and convince developers to do something the right way, and that's perfectly okay. No one's going to tell you off, but they just might not listen to you. I think in the OpenDaylight community, there are discussions around how do we get a broader community involved. One of the things that became apparent to me during the last discussion on NBIs is that the controller can't define an NBI for applications. The applications have to define the NBI they want to use, and the controller needs to provide that. We need to have a community that involves those applications, that brings those application requirements or consumer requirements into the community. And those consumers are probably not going to be pushing code into the controller. So I expect that in some way, shape, or form, the project is going to find ways of engaging those communities. I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything concrete that's going to happen, but I know the discussion is ongoing about how to get consumers, users, and even potentially customers involved in helping the OpenDaylight community understand the problems that it's solving. Yeah. Anything else? Anyone? Yeah?
If OpenDaylight is as successful as we hope, how will the development scale over time?
Okay, so the question is how will the development scale if OpenDaylight is as successful as it hopes? I think you have to look at other open source projects. OpenDaylight bases its governance quite a lot on Eclipse and OpenStack and the way they're being run. And both of those projects have many thousands of contributors, and they scale quite effectively about how they manage multiple projects, competing projects. And essentially, what I didn't go into actually, which maybe I should have in that context, is that there is a life cycle for a project. So projects can start as ideas, and then they're called incubation projects. Once those incubation projects have gone through some release cycles and have become adopted as key components of the controller, they become mature projects. And then some projects can move on to core projects if they're kind of part of the foundation. As those projects evolve, I guess the way those projects are interacted with and the people interacting with those changes, but the community around can stay and grow in an incubation style very, very easily and with great scale. So the Linux Foundation itself provides the mechanisms we need in order to scale. They have years of experience with that. I would expect, and since it hasn't happened, but I would expect that the Technical Steering Committee would become more driven by the development organizations, not the development people, committers, software architects. The TSC has been seeded by core companies for now. I'm one of those examples. I haven't pushed a lot of code. I won't expect to be on the TSC in the future. I would expect that someone who has driven a lot of code in, who is fundamentally aware of the architecture and the main issues will take over ownership of the TSC, and the decision functions of the TSC will become much more effective through that. Okay. Any more questions? No. Okay, thank you everyone. Enjoy an early break.